What does it mean to be black and artist? My name is Lecky. I'm a digital artist and designer from London. To learn more about the experiences of black artists in the art community, I have spoken with two visual artists, one from the UK, the other from the United States. They have shared with me their opinions and experiences in the art community.
I think an artist is anyone who uses creativity to express themselves. So whether it's creativity to talk about something that's important to them, or start conversations around things, or just express how they're feeling, or just use it as a vessel for kind of releasing bad emotion, or any form of expression using the arts. And I think an artist can be a filmmaker, a musician, a dancer, theatre practitioner, anything. All of that stuff definitely falls within the arts, and they're forms of self-expression.
So I think an artist is like anybody, I guess they don't have to be a creative, but like usually they're creative. And I think it's anyone really who expresses an idea that, you kind of create something, and then you create something where there was once nothing. So, you have a space where, you want to fill that space with some type of expression of an idea, and you do it, whether that be on the canvas or whether it be with video or music or anything like that. So I think that's what makes an artist, just somebody who expresses something, and you create something where once there was nothing. I think that's really only for me that's the only criteria.
My inspirations come from multiple things. Sometimes it is something really straightforward, like just wanting to upskill or learn something new or push myself. If I've seen something that someone else has done, which is similar to mine, but maybe better, or uses slightly different tools, or a slightly different way of working, and I see it and I'm like, oh, I would really like to learn how to do that. I'd really like to get better. Like that kind of thing really inspires me. And like, I do really like challenging myself in my work. So sometimes it is just really kind of straightforward things like that. But sometimes, a lot of the time, like my work has quite a lot of social and cultural, political undertones to it. And yeah, I think that's because I'm quite receptive and responsive to things that are going on in the world and around me, and things that affect me. Like I've created loads of work around like identity, exploring that, a lot of things which talk about politics and race specifically in the last year, because that's something which has been brought even more into kind of spotlight, I guess, for Black artists and people of color as a whole. It's something which is always in the spotlight in our lives, but it seemed like for the first time last year, the rest of the world finally caught up. So it was like this really intense, like focus on it. So that's kind of something which, I responded to and create some work around, just to try and use art as a platform for some of that conversation, really, and just to express voices and experiences, really. So yeah, that's something that inspires me.
I tend to draw a lot of inspiration from pop culture. I watch a lot of science fiction, or maybe not even just science fiction, but all type of fiction like fantasy or drama movies and stuff like that. If I find, usually it's a character. If it's a character who I really connect with, or I really like whatever motivates that character, I might be inspired to draw that character or paint that character or express them in a certain way. I also have a lot of stories that I want to tell to the world that aren't already out there, just original stories that I want to tell, and that tends to inspire me deeply as well. So.
I am connected to it in like personal ways, because I always create things that I feel personally about. Like, even if I'm taking on work which is commission work and it's something for someone else, I usually end up doing projects which resonate with me and that I like. I think there's some part of my job which is a bit corporate and doesn't necessarily always feel like much of a connection to it sometimes. Like I draw a lot of conferences and things like that, and sometimes like that's just kind of part of my job, but a lot of the time it is things I gravitate towards, things that I'm interested in. So yeah, like I was kind of saying in the last answer, like certain things like the trainers, the sports, the kind of politics, and all of that is stuff which speaks to my own experience and identity and interests and passions. So for me, yeah, it definitely feels like I kind of use my art to talk about myself and show who I am. I say that's probably my main connection to it, is I do use it to show who I am. I'm not a super verbal person. I'm not good with things like writing and poetry and writing paragraphs about myself, but I think my art does talk for me in that way. So that's, yeah, probably my main connection to it, I think.
A lot of it is either characters I connect with, or it's a personal, I want to say, I call them adventures, like personal adventures in my life, whether it be a relationship or an experience I had with a certain person, or you know, a group of people or whatever. That's what tends to inform my creativity. So if I'm, you know, if something happened and it's an experience that kind of sticks with me, either negatively or positively, that tends to come out in my artwork or in how I express that artwork. So a lot of it is very intimate and very personal.
In a really big way. I think especially recently, like as I've done more art, like I've used it more as a platform to talk about the Black experience, and used it as a platform for other people to talk about the Black experience as well, whether that's through interviews and drawing portraits of the people that I've talked to and presented their words on the piece of paper, like any way in which I can use it to kind of highlight what people want to say and how people feel. And I think I want it to be forward thinking and like encourage people to think about like going forward how things should be and how things need to be and what we need to see from the world. So yeah, like it definitely has massively affected and informed my work, being a Black artist, being a mixed race artist, and exploring these things within it. It has, because especially if you're creating stuff which is quite heavy or political and off the back of difficult things that have happened, and it can be quite tiring as well, and I think are quite emotional when you're putting yourself into things. So for me, I tend to have periods of time where I'm working quite intensely on stuff like projects which explore certain things, and then I like to have quite a big break. I like to disconnect from it as well, because I don't think it's sustainable to continuously put out work which is political or social, or you can't like continuously talk about it. And also you shouldn't have to either. Like Black artists and Black creatives a lot of the time are expected to just make work on Black issues, and it's like, oh, okay, like especially organizations really want to hire Black creatives to create things for Black History Month, or like we're doing this exhibition on, you know, this thing, like, yeah, like we want to give it to you like because you're Black and it's the same issues, or da da da. Whereas like actually, like if we're not limited to creating work on race, and especially with even things like panels, like panel discussions, so often at the time it's just like, okay, so there's a panel discussion on diversity, let's just get loads of like Black creatives in to talk about it. And it's just like, or we could talk about things which are to do with economy, industry, anything else. Like I think that definitely affects it in a big way. I think the world needs to kind of catch up and recognize that, yeah, Black artists and Black creatives aren't limited to just creating work about like one particular thing.
I feel like I have to prove myself a bit more in certain spaces, you know, in certain spaces, it's like, oh, this person is, he's good, but, you know, and this could just be me being paranoid, but it's like, oh, he's good, but like maybe we don't want to support him that much because he's the skin color that he is, you know? And so I obviously can't read anybody's mind. I don't know that that's what they're thinking, but I know racism does exist. And so that tends to be something that I think about as I'm presenting my artwork. But on the flip side of that, that tends to make me push harder. I was reading this interview from FKA Twigs. And she said something that really stuck with me that I really liked. She said, you want to be so good that it would be absurd for them to not consider you the best in the room. And so that tends to be how I approach it. Like, I want my art and my skill to be like so top notch that like you can't, no reasonable person in their right mind can look at my art and say I'm a bad artist. And that tends to be what helps me push through that paranoia of maybe they're going to not support me as much because I'm Black.
Definitely not. I think following on from the last question, just around, yeah, like we have representation in content and in media and in art forms that talk about like relevant things or relevant issues. And I think there needs to be a massive expansion and just allow Black artists to just be able to create work about whatever it is that they want and not be boxed into certain categories or boxed into like certain expectations of things that you should be doing and should be making and should be talking about. I think that definitely needs to be pushed down and pushed out. And even like we've been reminded of that so much, like how many jobs and how many opportunities like myself and a lot of my friends have got this month because it's Black History Month, and organizations want to do things to celebrate it and showcase it, and they think about it in the last week of September, and then it's like, oh no, we need to do stuff like that. It's like, well, why can't you showcase our work and our platform and our voices all year round? And then there's no representation for most of the year, and then it's really condensed into one period of time. And I think it just needs to be just normalized and like just recognized that we can contribute to the art scene here. We have immense talent within our community, and there's so many people doing great things, and I think just having more platforms to be able to do that is really important. I also think like people at like the higher up levels, a lot of the time people are really trying to change it and trying to give opportunities for Black collectives of artists to do work in the city, and that's something which is definitely like increased in the last couple of years. But it's one thing, like I think it's great, like continue to do that by all means, continue to give us space, but ultimately the people that are still kind of in charge are still the same people. So I think until we start to see change at the higher up levels, having younger, more people of color as a whole in those positions of power where you can actually, you are the curator of the gallery, or, you know, you are the board's members, stuff like that, I think, because that's where you really have a say in the actual like structure of how a place runs. So yeah, within the arts there's opportunities for us to put our work up on walls, but ultimately we're still not in spaces enough, like we're not in positions of power, we're not have enough like say and influence, I don't think yet. So I mean, yeah, I hope that changes, and I think people want that to change, but it just takes time. So yeah, no, not enough representation.
Depends on which community. Like if you're talking about music, absolutely. If you're talking about, I think visual artwork where you're painting or stuff like that, absolutely. I would say in the, what do you call it? Not high class art, but like the commercial art world, I am not so sure, because I know that is a much more corporate game. And so like just overall, we have a harder time breaking into that world. My first like day job as a graphic designer, it took me forever to get, because I didn't have certain features that other people might have had. And so I don't want to attribute it solely to that, but I think it did kind of play into it. I applied to a job one time and they wanted me to send a picture of myself for a graphic design job. And I'm like, for what? Why was that? How would that affect how I'm able to do my job? It's stupid, And so, stuff like that occurs. And that's why I think there's a bit of a barrier, because there's, some bias towards people that look like us, or against people that look like us.
So I thought about this one before I came in. And yeah, I was really looking for a big piece that I'd done, or like something which was really powerful and really like moving. And I've got some good projects that I could share, which are some of my favorite ones. But ultimately, my favorite piece is a drawing that I did of Frank Ocean a couple of years ago. No, it was 1 year ago. And Frank Ocean is one of my favorite artists ever. Like, I love Frank Ocean, like his music and just everything. Like, he's been so significant for me throughout many different stages of my life, and he like just has a special place in my heart. And I recreated the Blonde album cover, and I love it because it was not only a portrait of Frank Ocean, but also just technically it was a really challenging piece to draw, because this when he's got his hand over his face and the droplets of water, and yeah, just learning how to draw like water on skin is really hard. And I've done it a few times before, but never on my iPad. That was an iPad drawing, it was digital drawing. And yeah, I just like, I felt like I really pushed myself with that as well. So it was making a piece which is important to me and important to my soul, but also it just really pushed me creatively as well. And yeah, it's hanging up next to me in my living room. So whenever I work, it's literally just always up there, printed out really big, like a poster. But yeah, that's it. It doesn't have a huge meaning behind it. It's not like a a piece that loads of people could relate to necessarily, but for me it's just really special, and yeah, that's why it's my favorite.
I did one called validation.exe, and I don't know if the camera's gonna pick it up very well. Hold on. Yeah, that's not working. It's on my IG page, but it says validation.exe in the caption, and that one is my favorite because that one's probably the most personal one I've done, and it's an image of a guy staring at a computer screen, and like a hand. It's like this hand like made of light, but it's supposed to represent like the internet. It's reaching out and like cradling his chin. And it represents my love-hate relationship with the internet, because the prideful part of me is telling me to find my value on my own terms, and I determine my self-worth, etc. But I also find myself caring about how many people are liking my posts, or how many people view my story today, or who replied, or even really petty stuff. Like, I look at my story and look at like, oh, who exited versus who watched the whole thing or whatever. Like, and you can't tell like individuals who did that, but it'll show you like the number of people who did that. And so stuff like that, it's ultimately kind of a self-critique, because it's like you're looking at the internet as like this program that'll kind of validate you and make you feel better about yourself. But you shouldn't be looking at the internet for that. You should find that from within.
It kind of shifts, I think, depending on like many different things. I think it can feel kind of isolating. It depends where you're working and what you're doing. I think if you're working in the arts and are in quite corporate and contemporary spaces, and I think that can feel a little bit, I always find a little bit isolating in a way, because often you're the only like black or brown face, in those spaces. So I think yeah, they're starting to change, but I think more can be done to make people of color and black people feel like welcome and safe. And yeah, so I think when I'm in those kind of spaces a lot, like I don't feel as good. But at the same time, the creative community here in Bristol, and the number of black artists, creatives, filmmakers, is huge, and it's growing. So we're all very connected and very supportive. It's a really supportive space as well. Like, everyone kind of knows of each other and wants to help each other and support each other and go to each other's shows and go to each other's movies and go to each other's exhibitions. And it really feels like a collective, like a really solid unit. And I don't know if we would have that if it was a bigger city, somewhere like London. Like, I think it feels really intimate here and really like you're really part of something. And yeah, I've been really reminded of that recently as well, just through some of the shows and the events that I've been to, and just being kind of brought back to the community again and seeing people again and seeing what people are doing and stuff in person. And yeah, it feels like a really supportive space at the same time. So whilst it has its challenges in terms of, yeah, I guess the industry itself, like the community and my peers, I value them a lot. And it's a really warm and like welcoming environment. anyways?
Well, we touched on it a bit earlier, where it's like I feel like there is some type of bias against us. I can say this overall. I've had more positive experiences. This isn't, I feel like maybe like a decade ago, or even as recently like 5 years ago, my experience might have been different if I was more open with it. But I haven't faced a lot of outright racism as far as my art is concerned. I feel like that would change if I painted about more divisive topics or things that were more controversial. But very rarely has someone made an attack on my artwork or made some type of critique on me as far as my skin color goes. But again, I think it's because I don't typically draw as much like racially divisive stuff. So I think if I were an artist who was more bold about that, I'd probably run into those types who want to focus more on my race.
Can be better, definitely. I mean, I can only really speak from my own like personal experience. I think from kind of what I've learned gathering, I did a project where I interviewed Black artists and just brown artists of color in Bristol around being in art spaces and the art industry and their experience of it. And I was really surprised because everybody had a really different answer. Like some people felt like spaces felt really good, but like other spaces didn't. And then some people would come in and say the complete opposite. And everyone had their struggles. So everyone had their issues with the industry. Some was like lack of opportunity, some was lack of positions of power, some were, lack of money, like funding, and, not wanting to support like projects for like with people of color and stuff. So everyone had their own issues with it, but no people really came back with exactly the same thing. So I think it treats people differently, and organizations some are better than others, some do a really great job of providing space for artists of color, I think, in the city, and that should be celebrated, and that they're doing good work, and really kind of questioning what needs to change and really looking inwards. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of spaces that do treat Black creatives well and with space and respect and everything that we deserve. But I think there's a lot of spaces as well that don't feel welcome for us yet. And those places aren't necessarily willing to make the changes or sacrifices or be vulnerable in the ways they need and be accountable for things that they've done wrong. And I think that's like, yeah, in those cases, which, yeah, it does happen. Yeah, it means that spaces can feel a bit hostile, and it will just, yeah, it's not the time to, yeah, be there. So it's hard. I found that, yeah, generally like recently I've been treated better and with more kind of trust, I think, to do jobs well. It takes a while, I think, to build up trust when you're like an artist of color. And it's only recently I've noticed a big shift in people's like willingness to just trust me to just input a project myself.
Going back to what they decide to cover, like if it's someone who are very, what's the word? If they're very opinionated, I mean, we're all kind of opinionated to a degree, but if they're very opinionated in their artwork and they express that in their artwork, you always have trolls on the internet who are gonna like that. I've seen a few artists post things on Instagram, and then the community that isn't really feeling that, they'll like mass report it. And even if there's something wrong, even if there's nothing wrong with what that person said in their artwork, Instagram just sees a lot of people mass reporting, and so they'll take the post down. And that's not really fair. And so I've definitely seen that happen with Black artists. I've definitely heard terms thrown around like playing the race card or race baiting, or if it's any other controversial topic, it's always something baiting. But like, again, I'm not someone who's really gone into that realm of controversy yet. I do have some thoughts on that, and that is something that I do want to tackle. But really everything I've observed about it has been through other people, seeing how they seeing the response that they got.
Say, firstly, finding networks and communities, and reaching out to other Black artists doing similar things to you in the city, and just sort of going to their shows, going to their events, and just sort of meeting people is really, really valuable, because as I was talking about in the last question, it's everyone's very connected. And I found once I started getting to know people and putting myself out there, I heard about so many more opportunities and so many more things that I could get involved in, and so many more spaces I could collaborate with people. So I would say finding that is really, really important, and it's just a really positive thing, I think. And there will be people that will do what you're doing or similar to what you're doing. And it's also a great opportunity to learn more as well, and kind of talk to people about your work. Another thing is just put your work out. And I think when I was at uni, I was like obsessed with everything looking like really, really perfect. And I think a lot of the time, and I know for a lot of people as well that I know, they don't put work out unless they feel like it's perfect, and then they end up never putting any work out. And it's just like, I think just kind of normalize just putting things out that you're proud of, or don't feel like it needs to be absolutely like 100% amazing. I used to see my Instagram as like a sketchbook, so I would just post things as I went, and now I've refined it a bit because I've refined my drawing, so I kind of know what the kind of thing is that I want to do now. So I've done that a little bit less, but at the start I'd just put out not absolutely everything that I did. Like if I hated it, I wouldn't put it out, but just using it just to get used to people seeing my work in a way, if that makes sense. And ultimately remembering that you're always going to be like your harshest critic when it comes to like creative work, because you're going to see all the things that you would have wanted to change and but just let people enjoy it. And because I promise you, people will not view it like as harshly as you do. Like people will probably really enjoy seeing your content that you put out if you do media. So it's like just sharing your work with your community and peers, getting feedback, and just getting used to the feeling of putting work out, is something which I would recommend doing. It can be really hard to do, I think, and but it's an important thing, because ultimately you will get paid for the stuff that people see you put out. Like I don't want to get paid to make any films. I make films sometimes for fun, but I don't put them on my social media because I don't want to start flooding it with films and then people message me like, hey, can you do a film? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I think if something is in line with this is the kind of thing that I want to get paid to do, let the world see it. So I think that's how I would try and view it, is okay, so I want to get paid to do loads of portraits at the moment. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to start putting portraits out, because then that will encourage that kind of work. And I guess lastly, the last bit of advice, sorry, there's loads of loads of things that I've thought of as I've been talking. Just be adaptable. So I am an illustrator, but I can draw digitally and traditionally. I can do like branding and design, do murals, children's book stuff, character design. So try and branch out your skill. Don't feel like you need to do photography, film, music, like that. Like that's quite broad, but within your like specialism, the thing that you like to do, I think whether it's filmmaking, be open to creating horrors, be open to creating documentaries, be like kind of just keep it open at the moment, and be open to opportunity, because like you want to be able to do a few different things within your specialism, I think, and not have it too narrow at this point. Not like I just want to do horror films. It's like, okay, you can do horror films, but branch out a little bit and refine it in as you go. So I would say those are probably the main things that I would suggest at this point. I hope that was somewhat helpful.
Well, the hard lesson I had to learn was that not everybody's going to support you. And that is, that's not just strangers, but that's like friends or family who you think might have your back or might show up for you. They're not always going to do that. And it's a hard lesson to learn because you kind of expect them to. It's kind of like an expectation. But, something I had to realize was everyone's not interested in what I do. You know, some people they're passionate about gardening, or they're passionate about teaching or science or something like that. So me posting a speed paint, I expect all my friends and family to like it, but everybody's not into that. So some of them are going to keep scrolling, and the instinct, the knee jerk reaction is to get bitter and to get angry at them. But you have to understand they're not obligated to support you, just like you're not obligated to support everything else that you see on your timeline. And so, it's kind of something that I had to get past. Um, what hurts is sometimes I look at one of my posts and it'll have like hundreds of likes or thousands of likes, and only 6 of them are people I know or people who I've met before. The rest of them are strangers. And so, definitely advice that I would give an upcoming Black artist is everyone's not going to support you, and you have to learn to be okay with
I enjoyed the conversation I had with Jasmine and Jay. Even though their backgrounds vary, they share similar experiences in the community as Black artists. What I've learned is that Black artists still have a long way to go and need to create more space to showcase their talent and works. We must also seize any opportunities that comes our way. As Jasmine mentioned, our work should be displayed all year, not just on special occasions commemorating Black experiences. I look forward to more opportunities, spaces, and trust created for upcoming Black artists.